So, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the European Commission's press room. Thank you also for following us live on Europe by satellite. Today is Monday, the 13th of March. The College of the meeting of the heads of cabinet of the European Commission commissioners is still ongoing, so this is why, exceptionally, I will not be in a position to confirm to you what is on the agenda of the College tomorrow. Like always, we will communicate to you about the agenda items once this meeting is finished, which would be shortly, so keep your channels of communication open. We will communicate on social media, through media advisories, and so on. What I can already tell you is that this is going to be a busy week. As I already told you, the week before, we will have two college meetings, one today and one on Thursday, because we have a large number of items pertaining to competitiveness and other issues. So be ready for a heavy week of press conferences and technical briefings. And this is also why I would like to remind you of a way that we have introduced to facilitate your work in such very busy weeks. You may remember we already informed you in March that we have, in agreement with API, decided to allow you to extend an invitation, a personal invitation to a technical briefing that we organized to a colleague from your news outlet, so that you can spread the work with an additional colleague in such very busy weeks. So this is, of course, limited to journalists that are accredited to the EU institutions. So if you are accredited and if you receive an invitation to a technical briefing that we organize, you can forward that to another colleague who can follow it on your behalf if you need to cover several items in the same week. So if you have additional questions about how this works, do feel free to reach out to our colleagues in charge of accreditation. Right. Now, je passerai au français pour
So let me switch to French. Let me just remind you that a meeting of the Eurogroup will be taking place this afternoon. In this meeting, Vice President Valdis Dombrovskis will be participating on behalf of the Commission together with Commissioner Paolo Gentiloni. The ministers are going to discuss the macroeconomic and budgetary developments in the Eurozone. They will talk about budgetary policy, so budgetary policy presented by the Commission, the evolution of inflation in the Eurozone, the strategic objectives of a digital euro, and they'll also discuss the coordination of global economic policies in light of the upcoming meeting of the World Bank and the IMF. The ministers also intend to approve decisions pertaining to the Eurozone and the re-examination of economic governance. As always, I would invite you to keep your questions, I'm sure you have a lot, for the press conference presented by Commissioner Gentiloni. This is going to take place after this meeting, so around 6:30 this evening. So that's it for our announcements today. And I would also like to welcome a group of visitors. So this is a young group of visitors who is with us today in the framework of the Erasmus program. And that really fills up the press room. And it really reduces the average age as well here. So I'm very happy to see that. So that was it for our announcements today. And let me open the floor for questions. David, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Dana. During the weekend, there was another tragedy at sea, 100 miles from Libyan coast. 30 people, even kids, died in the sea. I'm wondering, first of all, why President von der Leyen published a tweet on Cutro tragedy, but not on this one. My second question is on what was not done by people that received aid from the EU to save people at sea. I know that search and rescue is a very complex issue. I know that it's not your competence. I know that you have an holistic approach. I know a lot of your lines. What I don't know is you have paid for Libyan Coast Guard vessels, quite a huge amount of money, tens of millions of euro, via Italy. The Italian authorities yesterday published a press release saying that the Libyan Coast Guard didn't intervene in the search and rescue because there was no vessel available. Is it normal? Where were the vessels paid by the EU to save people at sea? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question, David. With regards to our support to Libya in general, I will give the floor to Anna, though I doubt that she can tell you why a boat was missing at a specific point in time to support and to rescue migrants in distress at sea. So that is, of course, a question of an operational nature which is impossible for the Commission to answer. With regards to your first question, it is indeed true that President von der Leyen tweeted as soon as we were aware of the tragedy of the Italian coast about 2 weeks ago. It is true that if we tweet or if we don't tweet or if we issue statements or if we give interviews or if we speak with our counterparts about this, the idea that every life lost at sea is a life too many and that we all need to do everything that we can in order to avoid this from happening again is always on the President's mind. So it doesn't mean that we only when we tweet or when we issue a press statement, we are working towards something or we are thinking about something. So again, I repeat, every single life lost at sea is a life too many. On the specific circumstances or anything else that Anna can tell you about Libya.
Many thanks. I think, as you mentioned, Anna, it's not obviously for me to mention on the specific circumstances in the sense that I do not have information of where boats are located exactly, whether it's on the EU side or on the Libyan side. So maybe just to clarify that point. But as regards to EU support to Libya, I mean, yes, you know that part of our fundamental support is to help stabilize the situation in Libya. But obviously, we're also stepping up support when it comes to try to enhance the border management capacities of Libya, precisely because we see that not always, or maybe in not every case, Libyans have all the means, or they could need reinforcement of their capacities. And you will be, you will recall that recently there was the first additional boat that was handed over in Italy as part of the UTF border management program. So more boats will be forthcoming. I do not have yet a timing announcement to give you. But yes, clearly we see that there's a need to reinforce the capacities. And maybe just to recap, when it comes to the issue of the boats, you know that so far 3 rehabilitated boats that were belonging to the GACS had previously been, six boats rehabilitated had already been delivered. They were belonging to the GACS and they have been rehabilitated in the framework of the UTF program, precisely to make sure that they're trustworthy at sea, these vessels. You know that the GACS are in charge of the internal waters of Libya, and the additional new boat that was handed over is intended for the Libyan Coast Guards, and again, more will be coming. So 2 additional new boats and some further rehabilitated boats.
David, go ahead, follow up.
We a double follow-up, if I may. One for you, Anna. The point, you know better than me that the boats are not for search and rescue, but for interception of migrants. And the problem is that they do not search and rescue. They do not rescue. They intercept. So when a ship, like during the weekend, is in distress, they do not intervene. That's the reality. So I'm wondering if you are going to ask to the Libyan authorities an explanation on what happened, or just close your eyes, waiting for Italian doing something, and so on. first question I'm going to ask. Second point to you, Dana. You said very clearly that il faut faire tout ce qu'il faut pour sauver des vies en mer.
You have to do your utmost to save lives.
One point missing from your communication and from your document, from your holistic approach, is search and rescue. You are not pushing member states to do search and rescue. You are not thinking EU naval mission to do search and rescue. Quite the opposite. The Italian government adopted the decree, and now is law, that is hindering the activity of NGOs' vessels, and you have decided not to intervene on this decree, even if there is a ruling by the European Court of Justice on another case, which is quite clear on the activity of NGOs' vessels, even if there are some doubt on other topics of the decree, as the pre-screening procedure, even if a boat is blocked in an Italian port, and it was a boat operating in the area where the accident happened during this weekend. So, search and rescue is part of your holistic approach or not? Thank you.
Thank you very much for this. Perhaps I give the floor first to Anna to answer to your follow-up on Libya, and then I will give the floor to Anita on search and rescue. We've discussed it last week again as well, David, and the Commissioner was in a position to answer questions about this several times last week, but we are more than happy to take it further with you. Anna first.
Yes, so I just think that I would give a general reply that, as you very well know, search and rescue is an obligation according to international law. So, whether it's EU assets or whether it's Libyan assets or whether it's whoever's assets, when you see a boat in distress, when you see people in danger, there is an obligation to act. This is very clear, and this is what we will be calling on all to do. Now, when it comes to specifically to the contacts, I would be happy to check if there's been contacts, whether at the delegation or more particularly with our Italian colleagues, which I guess it would be the most appropriate way of following up. So I'm happy to check if there's been specific contacts in this case, but I think that in general terms what we're trying to do is work with all the instruments that we have within the limits of our competence, to also including support partner countries to beef up both, their border management capacities and, of course, also to rescue lives at sea. So I think that this is, one is not excluding the other. Again, it's an international obligation to save lives at sea.
Seamlessly, we continue with Anita.
Yes, thank you. In addition to what Anna has said, it is not correct to say that the Commission has not engaged. Quite in the contrary, we're engaging with the Italian authorities. Even though search and rescue is a member state obligation, we are striving to ensure that there is a coordinated approach. This is why we have the search and rescue contact group revival, with the meeting that took place for the first time again in person since 2021. We have discussed this several times, including with Commissioner Johansson, and this meeting has brought together the member states to discuss the current challenges in the Central Mediterranean. We have also put forward in the Central Mediterranean Action Plan, a dedicated action plan for the ongoing challenges in the Central Mediterranean, also for the search and rescue, to ensure there is a coordinated way ahead.
Thank you. David, another follow-up.
Apologies, really, sorry. But I cannot see a coordination when, as during the weekend, Malta refused to intervene, Italy refused to intervene, asked to the Libyan authorities to intervene, they refused to intervene, and at the end of the day, 30 people died. Where is the coordination?
Thank you very much, David. I think you need to distinguish between several types of coordination, and here what you are talking about is about operational intervention in relation to a certain boat. And this is, I don't know if Anita has anything to say in relation to that, but the type of coordination that we have been talking about doesn't include operational discussions about what boat to intervene there. This is not something that the Commission has in its capacity nor competence to do. Right. Any other questions on this matter or on migration? Mose.
Just a very small comment or question to what David said, because I always got the impression that the Commission always refers to the need to do something about smugglers. I mean, those who are smuggling, let's say, or trafficking, as she says, migrants from Libya, from other countries. Is that the reason why it seems to be this lack of coordination in rescuing migrants at sea? Thank you.
Anita?
There are two strands that we need to tackle on the external dimension side. First, David had the specific point on search and rescue and the tragedies that we need to witness and we're witnessing on an ongoing basis, unfortunately, that are calling for the need to adopt the pact, but also on the need to immediately deliver on the operational measures that we have put forward. And this is also the fight against smuggling. This is one of the elements that are also in the Central Mediterranean Action Plan, because we need a coordinated action also on fighting smuggling and also in cooperation with our third partners.
Lorenzo.
There were quite a number of novelties in the response that the Italian government gave when they met in Cutro last week. And in particular, there is this new crime that for smugglers that cause, I mean, they are, even if not deliberately, the death of at least one person, there can be 30 years of prison. And my question on this is about the fact that this has an extraterritorial value. So the Italy thinks that it can apply this also when the smugglers acted out of the Italian territory. And my question is, how do you see this? Is it possible? Second thing, it's about the quite surprising solution that Premier Giorgia Meloni proposed concerning the migrants that they want to come to Italy. She said we reopen the legal migration for those that want to come as workers on one side, because until now it was completely filled by the illegal migrants, the quota, the annual quota, and we do it for 3 years. And second thing is this insistence of on humanitarian corridors. The fact that people that think to have the right for international protection can go to the diplomatic representation of Italy, but also other European countries, and ask to to start the proceedings for asking asylum. How do you see these three things? I mean, it's clear that they all want to render without object, as say in French, sans objet, the mechanism of the business model of the smugglers. But how do you see these answers? Are these answers that are seen at the European level as realistic, possible? Are you working on that? Thank you.
Thank you for your series of questions, Lorenzo. So clearly putting migrant smugglers out of business is an aim that we all need to pursue at the European level, because they are reckless, they are making money on the back of despair and risks taken by migrants seeking to reach the European Union. So very clearly that the objective is one that we all share. As to the specifics of the new Italian initiatives, I wonder if Anita has, at this early stage, just a few days after, a sort of a more legal reading beyond the political aims to share with you.
Thank you, Lorenzo. I don't have specifically anything new to add on the initiative because we will not comment in any case at this stage. But let me reiterate once more the need on working together on developing coherent and strong anti-smuggling programs. This is something that we're doing and also putting forward with the Central Mediterranean Action Plan. We are working on developing a new regional anti-smuggling program in North Africa and anti-smuggling operational partnerships in Tunisia and Egypt are being prepared. And in terms of your second point, indeed, there is a need that we continue working together on enhancing the legal migration pathways and also on ensuring support for member states in this specific regard as well, because we need indeed to ensure that we can provide a real alternative for those putting their fate in the hands of criminals, but we need to do so by fighting smugglers and also prioritizing safe and legal avenues.
Thank you. I wonder if the colleagues who have their hands up in the chat want to ask about the same issue. I see that Eleonora and Vincenzo have their hands up, so please only keep it up at this stage if you want to ask about this issue. Yes, it seems that's the case. So, Eleonora, go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. I am Eleonora from Euractiv. I have a question about the Irini operation in the Central Mediterranean, which has the goal to fight illegal trafficking of weapons from Libya, on petrol, but also training the Libyan Coast Guard and, of course, as you wrote online, dismantling human trafficking networks. So my question is, when the boat was intercepted by alarm phone on 11th of March and the 24 hours following, where were the vessels of the Irini operation? And my second question is, which are these outcomes of training Libya Coast Guard, while in these situations they even did not intervene? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Irini is something that would rather be for Peter, so there he is.
Thank you, Eleanor, for the question, and let me start with a few clarifications. So first of all, Operation Irini was designed and approved by the member states in order to, first of all, enforce the UN arms embargo on Libya. This is the primary task of Operation Irini. Operation Irini has also secondary tasks, among which, yes, it's also to work on dismantling the smugglers' network and conducting, when necessary, search and rescue operations, as any other vessel under the sea, international law of the sea. Operation Irini cannot operate in Libyan waters. The search and rescue actions and operations in Libyan territorial waters are allowed only for the vessels of Libya, not for the Operation Irini. So, and the other thing is that Operation Irini, the vessels of Operation Irini, are patrolling only in a specified area which was determined by the agreement of all the member states. And this area is not where the main migratory routes are running through.
Thank you. Eleonora has a follow-up question. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
We can, Eleonora. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I just want to point on the Libyan waters. I mean, it was not on the Libyan water. It was in the SAR Libyan waters, which is not it's not national, it's not Libyan waters, it's international waters. It's just a SAR zone. Otherwise, Italy could not coordinate the SAR operation. So they were in international waters. They were not in Libyan waters.
Thank you so much.
So where were these vessels of Irini? They were nearby. They were on the ports. I mean, my question: where were these boats? And they can intervene in case of search and rescue?
Thank you for the question, for the relaunch of the question, Eleanor, but I hope you can understand that we cannot comment so much about the presence of the boat in distress that led to the tragedy, because this is sometimes operational information that we do not have directly. But
indeed, absolutely. But on the second part of your question, of course, if a vessel of Operation Irene is close or the closest one to an unfolding tragedy, of course they have the obligation to intervene as any other vessel. So this is not linked to the fact that it's Operation Irene, but it's linked to the obligation of every vessel close to an unfolding disaster. When it comes to the question about where exactly the vessels were, maybe, since this is very strictly operational, you can check with Operation Irene if Operation Irene is at liberty to disclose this information.
Thank you very much. Any other questions about this issue? Vincenzo.
Good morning, Vincenzo Genovese from Euronews. I have a question on the same shipwreck, same issue. The Italian Coast Guard denounces the inactivity of other maritime rescue and coordination center, namely the Maltese one, I guess, given that Libya has no center.
Vincenzo, I was trying to communicate with you to ask if you are trying to put a camera and you don't succeed, or if you have another issue. Because you are aware that you need to have your camera on in order to ask questions remotely.
Okay, I'll try to fix it up.
We give you a few seconds. It normally works. Let's see. So I may give you a bit longer to try to sort out this issue, because I think we have a question in the press room about the same issue. So I can give the floor to Nicola, and that will give you a few minutes to sort out your camera issue.
Oui, si je peux me permettre, puisque Peter est là.
Yes, since Peter's here, this is a subject that has to do with foreign relations, and so
donc Nicolas Bouveret, B2 Sud-Ouest. J'avais une question sur les sanctions pour le RD Congo.
I'm wondering about the Congo RD. The UCJ cancelled two Kabila sanctions. There was no proof. They said the effects were too far in the past, and basically the European Union didn't take into consideration the situation on the ground. And so do you have any comment on this cancellation of the sanctions? It's not just a formal issue. This is an issue of rule of law. And, what about, the situation which has changed and not been taken into consideration? Yes, we took a note of this decision, and the member states indeed will look at the repercussions thereof. All the decisions on sanctions are made by the member states of the EU.
Merci, Peter.
Okay, Vincenzo, have you solved your camera issue? That doesn't seem to be the case. So I think he will have to raise this question bilaterally for Peter.
Now, go ahead.
Thank you, Dana. I have actually two questions on foreign relations. The first one is that last week, Saudi Arabia and Iran agreed to resume their diplomatic ties, and that through China mediation. Now, this was recognized by the International Committee, China's role, including the UN. And I saw your statement on this. The EAS welcomed this move, but there was no mention of China's role in this. So, first of all, were you surprised by this unexpected move? And secondly, how do you see China's role now after this development in the Middle East? Will it be a more active role, more influence in the region, or what do you think about it? Thank you.
Thank you, Nawab. The first part of your question, I would say the European Union is always encouraged when we see signs of normalization of relations. That's very important because this is what the world nowadays needs more than anything else, that there are no more frictions but more reconciliation, more normalization. So in this sense, the European Union has welcomed the announcement about the re-establishing of diplomatic ties between Iran and Saudi Arabia. We appreciate it. We acknowledge the diplomatic efforts leading to this important step. And on the second part of your question, well, I mean, China is an important international player. China is a permanent member of the UN Security Council, and as such has a special role or special position, but also a special responsibility to contribute to the defense of UN Charter and to the respect and upholding of international law. And in this context, we urge China repeatedly to use this role in efforts to make Russia to stop its illegal aggression against Ukraine. And in the same way, we expect China to use its possibilities and responsibilities it has to contribute also to solving all the other global problems around the world. So the recent example of China's role in the facilitation of an agreement aimed at re-establishing the diplomatic ties between Saudi Arabia and Iran shows that China can contribute to stabilization of regional tensions in a positive manner.
Thank you. Nawab, you have a follow-up question?
It's a second question, actually, that last week the UK, France and Germany, the so-called E3, decided to shut down this Instex mechanism, which was created in 2019 to facilitate trade with Iran. So can you tell us something about it? What is your reaction to this? Thank you.
Thank you, Nawab. Although this was not an EU instrument, we welcomed and supported the establishment of Instex back in January 2019. And Instex as a mechanism created by some European countries, so not the EU, but by some countries in Europe. This mechanism was managed by the Board of Representatives of these countries. So then we can only take note of their decision about the liquidation of this special purpose vehicle, and we took note, and it's their decision.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I see two more hands up for Peter in the chat. Oh, Mose first, go ahead.
Yes, I would like to take the opportunity to ask Peter questions about EU's relations with other countries and its comments, not comments on what is happening there. I'm thinking about the fact that the High Representative hasn't yet commented on the controversial judicial reform in Israel and its implications for EU-Israel relations. Okay, I don't want to preempt, let's say, he's supposed to give a speech, I think, tomorrow at the European Parliament on this situation there, and maybe we'll be asked questions about this also by the members of Parliament. But in fact, he did comment last week on a very minor matter in Georgia about the single law on foreign agents and how that will impact, let's say, Georgia's chances to becoming a member state, because it's aspiring to become a candidate country first. And he will have a much more important issue about the whole set of far-reaching let's say, reforms which are in Israel, which might have serious consequences not only for the country's own, let's say, rule of law, but also from what EU, I think, cares very much, and that is, of course, the peace process and the situation in the West Bank. And there we know that the High Commissioner has recently, and also you as spokesperson, let's say, commented and condemned, let's say, this vicious circle of violence in the West Bank. And so the question is why he hasn't yet commented on this issue, which is so important, I think, for EU. And it seems to me that it could play into the hands of those forces in the region which perhaps wish that there will be a constitutional crisis in Israel, which will weaken the country and might even risk to cause it will implode internally. Thank you.
Thank you, Mose. A number of points. I'll try to address all of them, and forgive me if I forget some of them, because it was really plenty. But first of all, I mean, when we reacted about the law on the foreigners, on the foreign agents, in Georgia. That was for the simple reason because Georgia is a country that showed an interest and applied actually to join the European Union, and the European Union responded in acknowledging the application and defining 12 priorities which Georgia has to fulfill in order to be in the discussions and considerations for the candidate status of the European Union. And with one single law, Georgia managed to infringe on 2 out of these 12 priorities. So I think that's quite obvious why the European Union has reacted. When it comes to the discussions about judicial reform in Israel, we see that there is a very lively discussion about the proposed reform and the suggestions, both within the framework of the institutions and beyond, also in the streets. And we never doubted the nature of Israel as a democratic country, and we never doubted the ability of democratic institutions in Israel to deal with the issues, and we see that they are dealing with the issues. So there is an ongoing debate. It's not our place to enter the debate saying what's wrong, what's right. We are following it very closely. Israel is a very important partner, and our partnership is based on shared values and principles. So, of course, the independence of judiciary, rule of law, democracy are very important principles which we are watching how they are upheld. But as I said, we are not entering ongoing discussions which have not been concluded and about which there is a very, very lively discussion ongoing in the framework and within the framework of the existing democratic institutions. Yes, indeed, High Representative is scheduled to speak in the European Parliament plenary debate tomorrow about Israel and all the other issues. And if I got it right, you said, why didn't we react to the spiraling violence? I think we reacted to the spiraling violence a number of times over the last few weeks. I would like to draw your attention to the EU27 statement, which HRVP issued in the name of all the 27 countries last week, where we are addressing exactly the spiraling of the violence, which is unacceptable. The European Union, all 27 member states, called all the actors to de-escalate, condemn the violence, the terrorist attacks, the incitement, the expansion of illegal settlements. So I think the European Union has spoken on a number of occasions and very clearly and loudly.
Follow-up, Mose?
Yes, a very brief follow-up. Perhaps I should correct myself. I meant, of course, the opposite. I was meaning, I wanted to say, of course, that the Action Service has reacted and commented several times on the spilling violence and the vicious circus of violence on the West Bank and so on. That's a fact. We know that. And that's exactly the reason why I could expect that the Action Service would also, let's say, comment on this judicial reform, because if it is implemented, it will make the perhaps situation even worse. It will have implications for the situation in the occupied territories. So maybe the High Representative, if he doesn't want to comment, let's say, publicly for diplomatic reasons, he could perhaps do it behind closed doors by visiting the region.
Thank you. Of course, we have regular interaction with our partners to convey our messages, expectations, or views behind closed doors. This is what diplomacy is about, and there are many ways how to do it. It doesn't have to be a statement. It doesn't have to be a visit in person. There are phones. There are diplomatic missions on the ground. So I think our Israeli partners know very well about our expectations, concerns when it comes to a number of issues. But again, short recap, when it comes to the ongoing debate within Israel about the judiciary reform, this is an ongoing debate where there was no result, there was no final decision made. So for us, it's not to comment on this. For us, it's to follow closely and hope that the democratic institutions in Israel will be able to deal with this issue.
Thank you, Peter. A few more questions for you. There were 3 in the chat, which I'm bound to take first because they were waiting for a long time. So first of all, Veihua, go ahead. I'm not sure we can get Veihua on the line. I have no sound and no image.
No? Oh, is that okay?
I can hear you, but I can also see you now, so go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I just want to follow up on my Indian colleague's question a little earlier. can you explain why the statement from the External Relations Service didn't mention China under Iran-Saudi Arabia's resumption of diplomatic ties? Because even the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, praised China's efforts. So, I mean, I don't know what's the reason. And also, just want to, since you mentioned your hope for China's role in the Ukraine-Russia conflict, and actually China made the peace proposal, and the EU has not really responded positively. I mean, even Macron, French president, responded more positively. I mean, China was able to mediate Iran, Saudi Arabia exactly because it didn't just take side for their conflict. The same reason. I mean, China thinks it's neutral. I mean, has had a good relation with both Russia and Ukraine. So why don't EU give it a try? I mean, it may not be perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Wei-Hua. Peter.
Thank you very much. Well, on our statements, I think they are quite self-explanatory. So the statement contains what we thought was appropriate to say on behalf of the EU in a given time on an appropriate on a given topic. So we would not go into the details debating like why something is not mentioned in the statement and why something is there. This is the statement. This is the position of the EU. Take it or leave it. On the second part of your question, well, the Chinese peace proposal, I think it doesn't make sense to repeat the reactions. You heard Commission's President von der Leyen talking about it, High Representative Borrell talking about it. But one element you mentioned is very important. You can be an honest peace broker when you don't take sides. When it comes to Russia, Ukraine, China is actually taking sides. China refuses to acknowledge who is the aggressor and who is the victim. China is putting at the same level Ukraine, which is under brutal, illegal attack in violation of the UN Charter, exactly the same charter China claims to protect as a permanent member of Security Council of the UN. So this is already one thing which is debatable in the Chinese attitude and Chinese proposal. Secondly, China is not really deflecting from the Russian narrative about the misleading narrative about this aggression. Sometimes multiplying and echoing the Russian reasons about the so-called genocide and encroachment by the NATO and similar nonsense. So if you want to broker peace, then of course everyone is welcome to broker the peace. First of all, needs to be accepted by the two parties involved. And as you have seen until now, Russia remained very cold and ignorant to any meaningful peace proposals. Instead, Russia is escalating and escalating and escalating in its atrocities against the Ukrainian civilian population and Ukrainian civilian infrastructure. But of course, any country is welcome to do as much as they can in order to bring the peace, because peace is urgently needed, and whoever can exercise their influence on Russia should do so that Russia stops this inhuman illegal aggression as soon as possible. And China has the leverage as a permanent member of the UN Security Council.
Thank you, Peter. I think, Wei-Hua, you have a follow-up question. Let's take that.
Yeah, I just want to follow up, because I know President von der Leyen's position, but actually, if you look at President Zelensky's comment, he was actually more positive about China's peace proposal. Also, China's stance is not really different from that of India, Indonesia, South Africa, many countries. So does that mean EU will reject any future mediation by India, South Africa, Indonesia, all those countries who, of course, have not condemned Russia as EU expects? Thank you.
Thank you, Wei. Actually, it's not many countries that didn't condemn. It's 141 countries. The big majority of the UN member states have condemned the illegal Russian aggression and called on Russia to stop this brutal aggression. The countries which abstained are only in their minority. It's a few dozens of countries, between 20 and 30, who abstain, and the countries who are supporting Russia and vote with Russia are between 5 and 7 in the UN. So let's get the numbers straight and the proportions straight. Second of all, it's not up to the EU to endorse any potential peace brokers. Of course, we welcome and support any peace efforts by anyone. We are not party of this conflict, although Russia tries very hard to involve us. But this is something, the peace talks are something for the Ukrainians and Russians first of all. And as I said, until now, despite the number of peace initiatives, let's take also the one from China, Russia's response is unconstructive, and Russia's response to any effort by the international community or its members to bring peace or to bring both parties to the negotiating table is just further escalation. Because for peace you need two, for war you need one. And Russia is not ready to stop its ongoing slaughter in Ukraine and its ongoing illegal actions in Ukraine. So when the moment comes that Russia will be able, then we will see any kind of peace efforts unfolding. But at this stage, it takes two for peace negotiations. Very important is how Ukraine feels about possible facilitator or negotiator. But on the other side, you need also Russia to be ready to come to the negotiating table and to discuss peace instead of continuing with the ongoing killings and destructions in Ukraine.
Thank you. I see two more questions in the chat for Peter. Is it about the same subject? Right, so then I will give the floor to Angela.
Yes, thank you. I don't know if it's for Peter because it's foreign affairs, but it's more on von der Leyen and their trip to Washington. So, can I go on? Yeah. Okay, the EU Council is asked for an opinion from the legal offices to check if the European Commission has exceeded its mandate by publishing the joint note with Biden last Friday. Basically, they're saying that the opinion, the position expressed by von der Leyen is different from the one established by the European Council last October on China. Do you have a reaction on this? Thanks.
Thank you so much for this. I missed the beginning of your question, so could you please repeat the beginning? Who is alleging this?
Yes, the EU Council has asked for an opinion from their legal offices to check if the European Commission has exceeded its mandate by publishing the joint note by von der Leyen and Biden last Friday.
Thank you very much. So at this point, I think I can free Anita because we have exhausted the migration questions and, of course, we may have other foreign affairs questions. So, no, look, Angela, we have continued our good cooperation with the United States, which we have launched years ago in order to address both questions linked to sustainable trade, as we have worked on with the United States in the framework of our bilateral cooperation since the beginning of the President's mandate. We have continued our good cooperation with new steps announced in Washington in relation to energy to ensure our security of supply. We have continued the good cooperation that we have launched and the good dialogue with regards to the clean tech economy and our dialogues on incentives. And we are bringing this in the framework of our Trade and Cooperation Council by diversifying and amplifying the work that we are conducting there. And in relation to China, I invite you to read the statement, and I recall you that there was a discussion that took place at several European councils with regards to our position on China. What is very clear is that in relation to the United States, we share the assessment that it's important to be vigilant, both in regards to ensuring our resilience through economic security and robust supply chains, which would not bring us in a position of dependency, not to repeat the situation and the risks that we have found ourselves in with regards to energy vis-à-vis Russia. So this is our assessment, which we share with the United States with regards to the need to ensure the robustness of our economic security and with respect to supply chains. Where we have a very clear position is that we are clear about the need to de-risk our relationships with China and the risk of dependencies. So we are not talking about delinking, we are talking about de-risking. This is our position, and this is the position that we have presented in the framework of the European Council and in the meetings that we have with our partners. David.
Thank you, Dana. My question is on the part on strengthening economic security and national security. President Biden and President von der Leyen stated that they have tasked their Sherpa to formulate key recommendation on economic security by the summer. So I guess that there will be a negotiation between the EU and the US administration. And then there are other parts that imply a sort of agreement that could be reached between the two parts. I'm wondering what is the basis of this negotiation? I mean, is it a Council mandate, European Council conclusion? Is there any legal or political text that define exactly what are the parameter that the European Commission or the Sherpa of the President should follow in the negotiation with the US part? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, David. I think that looking at the respective point in the joint statement, you will see that this is also placed in the broader framework of the G7. And you may recall that economic security from precisely this perspective is one of the priorities of the Japanese presidency of the G7, and if I am not wrong, the summit will take place before the summer or around the summer, and this is basically work which is congruent with our presence and with our work around the G7. So following that and the discussions in Washington, we will see what would be the additional steps with regard to the process, and obviously we will always go to the European Council and to various council formations should the work involved in this process be relevant for various sectors of the Council's working groups or various other institutions. So we will be mapping what work there is to be done together on that in relation to also the work of the G7 and obviously the institutions that would be appropriate, responsible or concerned, or the working groups and all the stakeholders that would be concerned will be consulted and involved in the appropriate way. Is it the same subject? Yes, well, let's stay with this because I believe that we have a few more questions about this. Go ahead, Nicolas.
Oui, excusez-moi de revenir sur le sujet d'Anna.
Sorry to come back to this subject.
J'ai pas tout à fait bien compris.
I didn't quite grasp.
Au niveau de l'expression de la présidente von der Leyen,
came to what President von der Leyen said.
Être en totale ligne
Does she feel to be fully in line with what the delegations of the 27 member states have said on China? Did she consult them? Did she give them the text of the declaration beforehand? Were there prior consultations before this European declaration was made together with the US? Thank you very much for the question, Nicolas. When it comes to the substance, I can say that we had a number of meetings with the Council. We discussed China there. President von der Leyen was very clear. She was very clear as to our assessment and analysis. She was clear as to the need for us to avoid falling into a situation whereby we would be dependent on the Chinese for a number of sectors, and a number of key sectors for us, raw materials being one example. At the same time, however, she made her assessment public with a number of speeches. These speeches set out our position We also set out the steps we felt were important and the steps that we feel could bolster our resilience. There was the speech she gave to Davos in January. That was one of them. So that's the position of President von der Leyen. She made that public. She shared her assessment. And she discussed this with the heads of state and government. She also made this public on a number of occasions. Now, once again, on the procedure itself, well, now, I'm not sure what kind of contacts there were beforehand. However, we do keep our partners informed of the various different steps, but I can't tell you precisely if there was a more formal consultation beyond the regular consultations and contacts that we have with our partners. This is within the European Union. Nicolas.
Juste pour préciser,
so just to clarify,
la présidente von der Leyen considère donc
President von der Leyen feels that she had a mandate from the 27 in order to make the declaration that she made in Washington, implicitly or explicitly. Indeed, we feel that this declaration that we signed together with the United States and our services worked on this declaration together with the American side. We did this over a number of months. This covered a number of fields, economic fields, clean tech, energy, trade, the sustainability of trade, the production of certain key goods, for example, aluminium, steel. All of the things that I've listed were part of a background work that we carried out, and the member states were kept informed of the various different developments on these sectors. When it comes to China specifically, and of course that's the origin of the question, let me repeat that we are confident that on the basis of discussions that we had with the Council, we are confident that our approach on this assessment and the various different steps we have to take together with our partners, and also in the context of international organizations like the G7 or the G20 where relevant, we are confident that all of this is part of a strategy that we share together with our European partners.
Yes, David, if it's about the same subject.
Yes, it's about the visit of the President with Mr. Biden. And the statement made. The American analysts are saying that, it doesn't treat what the American analysts are calling the German Pearl Harbor, which is the Nord Stream problem. If it's a problem for Germany, it's a problem for Europe, European Union. The American sources are saying that there are three sorts of agencies involved, American agencies, and the information is coming from American agencies, the Norwegians, and now the Ukrainians. So I'm wondering what was discussed between the President von der Leyen and Mr. Biden.
Thank you so much for the question, David. With regards to Nord Stream 2, what is very clear is that that incident is the subject of investigation by member states' law enforcement authorities. Yes, there are various speculations in the press about who may have caused the blast and why, and that has been the subject of many discussions and many questions here in this press room. Allow me to say that we will never take a position or comment on anything regarding who may have done that before we see public statements and the result of the investigations by the law enforcement authorities of the member states which are in charge of that. In the absence of such a report put on the table by those conducting the investigations, we are never going to express ourselves or express any position or venture into any discussion with regards to that. I have nothing to inform you about with regards to this subject being discussed in Washington at this stage. David.
Logical to most people and common sense that if a lot of Americans who are well informed are saying the Americans involved, you would ask the person who's the president of the United States what he knows about it. So you're saying that this question wasn't raised at all with Mr. Biden?
I'm telling you that I have no information about this question being raised in Washington last Friday. Any other questions about this? Go ahead. It's still for Peter, so you can go ahead, yes.
I have a question for Peter on Moldova, because last Friday Commissioner Johansson said that more needed to be done to strengthen security in Moldova, and there has been a letter of intent signed by her Moldovan counterpart with Europol. So I wanted to ask whether, in light of the recent events over the weekend, if you could provide any more details on what the EU is doing to strengthen security in Moldova, and whether we should expect any measures against the oligarchs who are accused of operating on behalf of Russia.
Thank you. I see three parts in your question. I will address two, and then Anita will join to address the third one related to Commissioner Johansson. First of all, on the overall security and overall situation in Moldova, Moldova is one of the countries most negatively affected by the illegal Russian aggression against Ukraine, and this is posing increased security risks for this country, and of course challenges, the related challenges. Over the past few months, we have seen that Moldova has increasingly become a target of Russia's malign actions, foreign interference, disinformation, hybrid attacks, and the aim of these is clear: to undermine and destabilize the country, to undermine the pro-reform, the anti-corruption, and the pro-EU government and administration in Moldova. So in this, we have the same assessment as the United States are having. Moldova is really at risk. And we, at the same time, are confident in the ability of Moldova to tackle these unprecedented threats and challenges, and we continue to support Moldova in strengthening its resilience. And how concretely? I mean, we stepped up support in a wide number of areas, including energy security, macro-financial assistance, and also security and defense, so that Moldova is better equipped and better able to fight the hybrid attacks, such as cyber attacks, and deal also with the information manipulations. Our experts are already working with Moldovan counterparts to address these evolving hybrid threats by increasing the cybersecurity, countering disinformation. An additional tool we are considering as the European Union is possible deployment of an advisory civilian mission in Moldova, which still needs to be agreed by the EU member states, and is currently debated. So all this is what the European Union is doing to strengthen Moldova's ability to deal with this malign interference coming from Russia. And on the sanctions, as always, sanctions are a decision for the member states, and any process of sanctioning, either discussions, considerations, proposals, are confidential, so I'm not at liberty to touch upon this.
Thank you. And on our support, in particular, as regards the EU Security Hub, because this is what you're referring to, since the last July, when we have set up the Security Hub, the close cooperation between the member states, the Home Affairs agencies, and Moldova has led to a status agreement allowing the deployment of Frontex border guards to Moldova, joint investigations in high-profile cases, and also an increase of support and cooperation in regards to countering organized crime. And Moldova is also joining 16 operational actions that are coordinated by Europol. So Moldova is therefore not only a beneficiary of the EU support, but it also has become a provider of the security. And the support for Moldova through the security hub to counteract key threats, be it firearms trafficking, migrant smuggling, trafficking in human beings, and the prevention of counter-terrorism and extremism, cybercrime and drug trafficking is continuing.
Right, thank you, Anita. And I think that now we will try to get Vincenzo again. Hopefully he can put on his camera at this stage.
Good morning, can you hear me? Vincenzo Genovese, Euronews.
We can hear.
Great, thank you. Sorry to come back to the topic of migration and namely the shipwreck in the Mediterranean Sea. The Italian Coast Guard denounces the inactivity of other maritime rescue and coordination centers, namely, I guess, the Maltese one, given that Libya has no center. So my question is, are this kind of operational problem discussed in the search and rescue contact group? Or what is this contact group exactly for, if not to discuss this coordination between member states, maritime rescue and coordination center? And second question, maybe not so unrelated. Commissioner Johansson said on Thursday that this week a new border management system will be presented. Can you already tell us when precisely and what we should expect from it? Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'll start with the latter one because there will be an announcement on this regard with the press point, so we cannot go too much into the details. And on the first point, if you are looking into the search and rescue contact group, this is indeed a coordination contact group that is supposed to gather member states, authorities, also all relevant maritime authorities and also NGOs. And the strand of work is supposed to look into the operational matters in terms of the coordination at the sea. Also, the meeting of the Search and Rescue Contact Group on the 31st of January identified the need to work on 4 main groups and topics which refer to the improvement of the situational awareness in the central Mediterranean, the need to enhance the cooperation among competent authorities on the search and rescue, having a better overview on the law and practices concerning private vessels involved in search and rescue, and possible engagement with the International Maritime Organization.
Thank you. Any other questions for Anita or Peter today? No. Thank you to both of you. And any other questions for other spokespeople today? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I had a question on the recent revelations on the Director General of DG Move. I wanted to ask whether the Commission President still had confidence in the Director General. And last week you've said that practically he had self-authorized, that there was no conflict of interest in going to Qatar. So I wanted to ask whether there is any evidence of this self-authorization, and if so, whether it could be shared publicly.
Thank you very much for your question. So to go back to this, let me remind you where we stand on the situation. So last week, you have probably heard about it. We announced that we are changing the rules with regard to our missions. So we have circulated a new guidelines for missions where we clarified and tightened further the situations when a mission can be accepted with a contribution from a third party, to put things in context from the large number of missions that our organization is undertaking through our staff. Only 1.5% of such missions are made with a financial contribution from a third party. So we are already talking about a very, very tiny number of missions where there is a contribution by a third party. But with the decisions that we announced last week, we have tightened and reduced even more the possibilities for accepting a mission that is covered at the expenses level by a third party. So now it would only be possible for Commission staff to accept missions paid for by third parties outside the European Union if they are in the framework of an international organization such as G7, G20, or for teaching at a university, whether private or public. And in the European Union, such missions would only be accepted if they are paid for by the authorities of our member states. So this is already a very clear tightening and a further clarification of the guidelines on when such contributions by third parties can be accepted. And those rules apply with immediate effect. The second change introduced in those guidelines refer to the fact that Directors General, who are, I recall you, the highest sort of administrative level in the European Commission services, will need to seek the approval of the cabinets and the heads of cabinets of the relevant commissioners when accepting any such travel paid for by third parties, even though, as I said, the rules are very clear. This can only be done in the very specific cases that I mentioned. So this is with regards to the rules regarding the approval of missions outside the European Union. With regards to the case of Mr. Hololei that we spoke about last week, indeed, we have shared the information that there was a number of missions that he performed outside the European Union where there were contributions by third parties, and according to that system in place at the time, he assessed himself that there was no conflict of interest that was involved in that mission. We also informed you that in line with our approach of taking a very close look at the perception of conflict of interest or the existence of a conflict of interest, we have referred the matter to our competent authorities. So competent authorities in the European Commission are looking at those missions that were performed with a contribution by third parties, and they will they're assessing actually since last week whether there is indeed a conflict of interest that can be excluded, or all the matters regarding those missions. So obviously I'm not going to tell you anything, I'm not going to jump to any conclusions before having the assessment of the competent authorities in the Commission regarding the circumstances of those missions, the context of those missions, and so on and so forth. It's not, yes.
Yeah, we're to find that there was a conflict of interest. Is there a procedure whereby they could sanction him, or, you know, potentially he would have to resign? Is there some procedure which is envisaged in case they do rule that there was a conflict of interest?
So, as I said, at this stage, we are at the level of assessing the facts, the circumstances, and the context with regards to those missions. Now, anything that is related to our staff is in the staff regulation. So I cannot jump to conclusions, and I cannot anticipate what the results, the conclusion of this assessment will be, but the appropriate steps will be taken depending on what the competent services in the Commission will find in relation to this matter. But I invite you to read the staff regulations. Balázs can even indicate to you the relevant articles which pertain to steps that are taken in various cases for your understanding of the rules that apply to us as they apply to all staff of the European institutions. Right. Any other questions about this? No other questions about this. So then we changed subjects again. And David, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Dana. It's not about this. It's about Qatargate, or should say Qatar, not Qatargate. According to a story published by the New York Times, Qatar paid $25 million to the ILO, the International Labour Organization, on the basis of an agreement signed in 17, if I remember well. This amount of money was not disclosed by neither Qatar, neither the ILO. My question is on ILO, because the Commission has used ILO as a gold standard to prove that Qatar was making good progress on labor issues. I recall the Vice President Skina's press conference after the Qatargate, mentioning the ILO, his tweets from Qatar saying that huge progress were made, blah, blah, and so on. And today we have this situation where ILO is in a quite serious risk of a potential conflict of interest. Have you assessed your collaboration with ILO on Qatar, and have you learned any lessons on this issue? Thank you.
Thank you for your question, David. So I think that I would certainly not use the expression golden standard or anything. What I would say is that it is ILO's job and mandate and mission to look at working standards and the labor situation in the countries worldwide. It is an international organization which has a very specific mission, and we are, of course, bound to cooperate with it, and we are bound to see what assessments that organization makes in relation to countries worldwide. And this is precisely what we have been doing in relation to all the countries, including, as you mentioned yourself, Qatar. Now, obviously, we have cooperation with ILO. We have representatives at the ILO, and we would raise any relevant issues in relation to the situation in Qatar, as we raise issues in relation to the situation elsewhere with the ILO. It's very clear that it's important to work with such organizations which are paid for, mandated, and tasked with a certain collection of data and observation of practices, and they are tasked with producing assessments with regards to the situation in any given country in the world, and we cannot substitute their analysis ourselves as the European Commission, and we need to rely on their assessment. But again, this doesn't mean that we are not raising with them issues in case we believe that their analysis needs to be improved, enlarged, amplified, deepened, or if there are doubts with regards to the objectiveness of the data or of the analysis that they have. I see that Marco has his hand up. Marco.
Yes, but it's on another subject, sorry.
See any other hand up, Marco, so you are welcome to continue.
Okay, thank you very much. I have a question on the EU regulation for car emission. Today there is a meeting of some ministers of transport in Strasbourg, and some of them said that there may be a meeting with some Commission representatives. So I wonder, first of all, if there is any meeting foreseen for the moment with the commissioners. And the second question concerning the EU regulation for the ban of car emission in 2035 that is now blocked in the Council. Do you think that it's an issue that the Council has to solve itself, or the Commission is planning to do something in order to give to these member states reluctant some reassurances, maybe with some political declaration or maybe with the presentation of any proposal for regulation on e-fuels. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Marco. So in relation to the meeting between several transport ministers from the EU member states, we are not part of that meeting. We are not attending it according to my best and latest information on it. And I understand that the ministers will discuss a range of issues that you mentioned yourself. In relation to the legislation under finalization in Council on CO2 emissions from cars, I think that we've been transparency telling you last week that not only are we following this with close interest and keen interest, but we are also ready to provide any clarifications to assuage the latest concerns that were expressed by a member state or a number of member states, and we are indeed in constructive talks with them to find a solution. We all share the aim with regards to the reduction in CO2 emissions at the level of the EU and with regards to having no CO2 emissions from cars, but we also said that it would be premature to tell you at this stage what the results of those discussions is and what the options we can put on the table. Now, Tim, who's following this more closely, is connected, exceptionally today not present in the press room but connected, and I will give to him the floor to see if there is anything more specific that he wishes to add. Tim.
Thank you, Dana. No, you've really said it all. I can confirm that also the information I have is that the Commission is not involved in these meetings between transport ministers this afternoon. And as regards the 2035 zero emissions targets, we are working constructively with the member states to try and get this vote through the Council as quickly as possible. So nothing more to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Tim. Any additional questions on this topic? Lorenzo.
I guess it's for Tim, if you can. It's about this, the Euro 7 that has been discussed today in Strasbourg by a dozen of ministers is criticized because it actually requires the industry to make investments for reducing the emissions of some polluting gases and particulate matter, while at the same time there is the 2035 objective, which means that some of those, those investments will be only for a few years, because these investments are for combustion engines, and this is the reasoning behind the meeting. So what does the Commission answer to this? Why is the Commission asking the industry to invest so much in the combustion engine in order to make it cleaner, seeing that the combustion engine is going to go after 2035. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Lorenzo. And here is Sonia.
Many thanks, Lorenzo, for your question, which is very pertinent, and this is a very important point of our proposal, because the Euro 6, the previous emission standard, dates from 2012, and since then already the industry itself has adapted and evolved. So the combustion engines, in comparison to the levels of emission that were in 2012, nowadays have evolved. So they are very much close to the levels of ambition and the targets that are set by Euro 7, meaning that the proposal that the Commission has made is realistic, it's ambitious, but realistic. And then, of course, the purpose of the proposal is to protect our citizens' health and the environment, and also to ensure that there is a smooth functioning of the single market with a competitive automotive industry. So in that respect, every improvement that could be done in view of the protection of the environment and also the health of our citizens is a benefit, is an added value, especially as I mentioned that the industry has already caught up a lot and is very close to this proposed standard by the Commission. And just to mention another aspect that Commissioner Breton has underlined also in the past, that the standards will be applicable in the EU for the combustion engines, and there will continue to be exportation from the European Union of combustion engine cars to third countries. So in that respect, to ensure that the produced combustion engines are at the highest level of environmental standards and also the protection of air quality and health of the citizens continues to be very relevant, also beyond the target date of 2035.
Thank you, Sonia. Any additional questions for Sonia on this matter? Yes, David, go ahead.
Yeah, hello. Hi, sorry, I got cut out when Tim was there, but it's the same matter, I think. I lost 2 or 3 minutes. It's just really a background question. So you've mentioned there are concerns among member states, or a member state, and that ministers are meeting today. And I was just wondering, totally in background terms and understanding, so if there were to be an agreement between the ministers, that would have to require a change in what's been agreed, yeah? It would have to go back to the European Parliament and be agreed again, yeah? Or could the Commission come out with some explanation or some declaration in terms of e-fuels and CO2 standards that would satisfy everybody? Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm not sure you are referring to the CO2 emissions in cars, right?
Yeah, this is CO2 emissions in cars. So there's a recital in the regulation that was agreed, and that recital was deemed by the Commission to be sufficient to clarify that point. And now we're seeing that member states are saying that that's not sufficient, and that they would like to see something else that would allow e-fuels in the future. So my question, once again to repeat it, is whether this would require some new agreement between the Council and the Parliament, or is it enough, purely in background terms, for the Commission to come out with some declaration? Thanks.
Thank you so much, David, for asking the question, and I couldn't believe it at the beginning, but now I understand you are asking us to be on background, on the podium, on the record, so that is clarified now. So now, just to be very clear, we cannot tell you more than we have said in relation to the previous questions. We are having constructive discussions to address the concerns that certain member states raise in relation to that proposal, and I cannot anticipate what what is going to be the result of those discussions and what that might involve. So we are not going to be able to say more on the podium on this today. Any other questions? Yes, Luis, go ahead.
That topic is about the Silicon Valley collapse.
Yes, it's fine to change topics because we have exhausted the questions in relation to cars and to Euro 7, so go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to know actually if there is any official reaction from the European Commission about the Silicon Valley bank collapse in the US. Thanks.
Thank you so much. That would be one for Dan, who is joining me on the podium.
Indeed, thanks, Louise. We are monitoring the situation. We take note of the swift and decisive reaction by the US authorities. Within the EU, there is a very limited presence of Silicon Valley Bank, and of course we are in touch with the relevant national competent authorities.
Thank you. Any other questions on this? Not the case. Any other questions on anything else? David, go ahead.
Thank you, Dana. It's a question probably for Stefan. on the origin of COVID-19. I wonder whether the Commission's been following the hearings in Congress where Dr. Redfield has been exposing the origins as far as he's concerned. He was the director of the Center for Disease Control in America, and he's a virologist. He explained that the COVID was in existence in the autumn of 2018, and he described how it had been artificially constructed for gain of function, and that it was these contracts were paid for by a number of American departments, Dr. Fauci's NIA, the Defense Department and the State Department. So I wonder if you have any reaction to that, and secondarily, do you have any information whether European laboratories or universities, anything else in the research area are involved with the Wuhan laboratory?
Thank you for your question. So on the first one, Stefan.
Hi. Very short reply to your first question. No. We don't comment. We don't have any specific comments. I think I can only reiterate what we've said already, I think 2 weeks ago here. It's important. The WHO is checking, working on the origin of the virus. We obviously support the work. It's important that everybody shares all the information so that a good work, a good job can be done. But we don't have any particular comments on the comments which have been raised in the United States on this matter.
Indeed. And on research, I don't think that we have any information that would be relevant for your question at this stage. Should anything appear, we will share the information with you. Johannes will be on that. All right. Any other questions for Stefan today? Not the case. Any other questions for anyone else? Also not the case, so thank you. Stay tuned for announcements regarding the agenda of the college meeting of tomorrow, which should be imminent, and we'll see each other on Wednesday.